Welcome to the Red Bull Theater Podcast, where guests discuss all things classical theater with your host, Nathan Winkelstein.
Welcome to the Red Bull Theater Podcast. I am your host, Nathan Winkelstein, and I am so thrilled to welcome today an acclaimed stage actress who's appeared in numerous Broadway productions and starred in a myriad of classical productions across the country over decades of an illustrious career. She is the powerhouse, Shirine Babb. Hi, Shirine. How are you?
Oh my God, quite an introduction. Thanks. Hi.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so happy to have you to talk some Shakespeare with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here today, really.
Right. Well, we've decided it for this podcast to focus on the character of Margaret of Anjou from the Henry VI's and Richard III tetralogy.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to be using as a jumping off point the famous molehill speech from Henry VI, Part 3. These numbers, and then when you realize they're all Roman numerals, you start to go, no wonder everybody finds all of this so confusing. And for a little bit of context for where we are in the overall history story of the Henry VI, we are at this point, Margaret, who is the wife to King Henry VI, has divorced herself from him in all but law after he was forced to give up their son Edward's inheritance to the Duke of York and his 4 sons. Margaret, not accepting this, has taken the lead of troops in a sneak attack on the York castle, which has led to the capture of the Duke of York and the death of his son Rutland, and now she confronts York.
What? Was it you that would be England's king? Was't you that revelled in our parliament and made a preachment of your high descent? Where are your mess of sons to back you now? The wanton Edward and the lusty George? Where is your valiant crook-back prodigy Dicky, your boy, that with his grumbling voice was wont to cheer his dad in mutinies? Or, with the rest, where is your darling Rutland? Look, York, I stained this napkin with the blood that valiant Clifford with his rapier's point made issue from the bosom of the boy. And if thine eyes can water for his death, I give thee this to dry thy cheeks withal. Alas, poor York, but that I hate thee deadly, I should lament thy miserable state. I prithee, grieve to make me merry, York. What? Hath thy fiery heart parched thine entrails, and not a tear can fall for Rutland's death? Why art thou patient, man? Thou shouldst be mad. And I, to make thee mad, do mock thee thus, stamp, rave, and fret, that I may sing and dance. Thou wouldst be feed, I see, to make me sport. York cannot speak unless he wears a crown. A crown for York, and lords bow low to him. But how is it that great Plantagenet is crowned so soon, and broke his solemn oath? As I bethink me, you should not be king till our King Henry had shook hands with death. And will you pale your head in Henry's glory, and rob his temples of the diadem, now in his life, against your holy oath? Oh, 'tis a fault too unpardonable. Off with the crown, and with the crown his head. And whilst we breathe, take time to do him dead.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Well, and the reason I sound so surprised, the reason for the listeners that I maybe sound that way is, as I understand it, Shirine, you actually don't have any performance history with this character, right? This is a
I
character that you're
do
currently
not.
exploring.
Exactly, absolutely no reference. The closest I came to becoming familiar with Margaret was years ago. I think it was around 2008. A young lady by the name of Elizabeth Gross, who now lives in Amsterdam, she wanted to do taking Shakespeare's the three history parts in Richard III and base a play around Margaret. And so she took all the parts related to Margaret to make this one classical play about him. And so that was my introduction to her at that time. But I wasn't even, it wasn't even for Margaret, it was for Elizabeth. So that's how I came to know of her. And I was like, oh my God, I can't wait for one day where I can work on her. So here we go.
Well, it's amazing that for basically a cold read, you could bring that much to such a complex speech. The Have you ever seen it performed?
I've seen movie versions of it. So I saw the old BBC production, I think with Peggy Ashcroft in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most recent I saw with Sophia Okonedo. I'm sorry if I'm butchering her name. In the Crown trilogy that they have, the Holy
Right.
Crown, which is also the War of the Roses. So that was where I got to see her work in that, or get to become a little bit more familiar with her. Yeah.
That's great. I guess my interest, so to some extent, your interest in it is obvious. It's
Oh yeah.
she is, from a lines perspective, she's the largest female character in the canon.
Exactly. We go. So here's my little background. I've played a lot of these wonderful, rich women in Shakespeare, and she's the one that I have not conquered yet. I have my Macbeth. I have my from Winter's Tale, both Helen and Paulina. I have these great women, Cleopatra three times. So I have my fill of playing these women. And I'm like, why have I not played Margaret yet? So that's where the interest lies, just wanting to conquer. And she is the largest. She goes from birth to, we go from her being a young wife, a young queen, rather, to a grieving widow. So
Yes, and spend, I think, much of our time in the middle with her probably being most dominantly a mother,
exactly.
which is I think an interesting element as well. And she is also, she stands out among Shakespeare's most powerful women in that, of all of the names you listed, she's vastly earlier in the
Yeah.
canon.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and obviously there's lots of theory behind the idea that the Henry Sixes were co-written with Marlowe.
Christopher Marlowe.
Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
and you can, if you've read or seen Tamburlaine, and then you read or look at Henry VI Part One, you can kind of go, really, it took us 400 years to figure out that this playwright was involved in this play.
Well, he was known for that. He was known to collaborate with few writers. They even said, like, this just came to mind. I don't know how true it is because I don't have the facts or the backing, but in conversations I've heard that he's responsible for writing part of Psalms. Is that true? Do you know of this?
I know of the theory. I know
Yeah,
you mean in the King James Bible?
exactly.
Yeah, I know of the theory. I feel like the if I remember correctly, and I'm not the right person for this, the scholarship is very mixed on whether or not this is wishful thinking or not. But he was certainly the preeminent writer of the time that the
Right.
great James Bible was written, and anyone who's read the King James Bible is like, that thing's poetry.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
so it certainly fits and feels right, but whether or not it's actually true or not, I think there's quite a bit of debate about.
There you go. There you go.
um so did you, I guess we'll start here, which is actually a somewhat complex question about Margaret overall, and then maybe we'll move into more minutia. But coming off of having such experience with Cleopatra, Hermione,
Mm,
all of
mm,
these type of Lady M, all of these types of powerhouse roles, that are from his later canon, how do you find on first blush? Because you're starting, which I think is actually really exciting for our audience. It's like, how does an experienced actor begin the journey of getting to know a character? Have
Right.
you found her
Easier
can
to
you
access or to
or
get.
harder, easier or harder to access than the
Well,
later ones?
I think the writing is easier to access because it's earlier on in
Mm-hmm.
that sense. And so going through the language is not as difficult as if I'm doing, let's say, King John, right? Or even Cleopatra, Antony and Cleopatra. But when it comes to who she is as the character, specifically because we're working on a history play, I always start with who the actual person was, right? So I took some time to go and read information about who was Margaret of Anjou and really getting to see how powerful she was and how much of an influence she had and the different tears that she was involved in and the fact that she owned land and where her background, where she came from, so much of that information just makes her rich as a person. And then I look at what Shakespeare had to say about her, because there is the introduction of the first time she-wolf being used with this play, and it's in reference of her specifically. And why was that? Like what does that mean to call this powerful woman a she-wolf? And so I start to break down context in that way, because it's one thing to know historically who she was, and then to find a way to bridge or to make that part of Shakespeare's perception or outlook on this character and see if they both align with each other or if there is a vast difference to it. So that's kind of where I started, and like I said, in finding so much of this information to be very inspiring and rich and fulfilling about who she was, made me want to continue to dig deeper
So
into her.
that's very, can I push at that a little bit? I'm
Yeah, yeah.
curious because we know that Shakespeare wasn't really writing history. He was writing art and sometimes blatant propaganda.
Right.
And I would say kind of most famously in this tetralogy, that is true in the Richard III character, who
Mhm.
there is obviously great historical debate
Mhm.
over how Richard III was as a ruler. And there's
Right.
quite a lot of scholastic historical push that Richard III was fine as a ruler. It's just
Right.
we really needed to show him being a monster because the people who took over for him were still in power when Shakespeare
Right.
was writing. And so I could see where somebody doing the exact same research that you're doing for Margaret, trying to do that
Mhm.
for Richard III, might actually send them down a wrong path. How do you pick and choose how to, like, what is helpful for you from the history while still then playing the character that's on the page? How do
Right.
you put those together?
So, so the very first thing I do is read the play, right? I
Mm-hmm.
read to see what Shakespeare has to say about her. And then there are questions that come up is how did she become queen? Why did she have so much power? Why was she so adamant about having her son on the throne? Why was it that she was able to lead an army in, against York? Like, how was this possible? So then that's what takes me into the history. And then when I'm reading the information about her, like, oh, she was in a certain line of siblings, right? And so it was due for her to become a queen consort, and knowing that this was the right king for her to be with because of their history of France. And then once knowing that, she was also a woman who had several lands that she was able to rule and control. And then she politically had, if you look at it in a political way, she did have to step in to be the ruler at the time. This was late 1400 when Henry, according to I think it was Plutarch or just historically, it says that he started to go insane. He started to break down, and so she was the one. He was not well to lead. He was not well to be king, and so she took the realm and took the helm. She was able to rule, and so that is like I think that that's where the parallels are. But then when you come across Shakespeare and you see, why do they call her a she-wolf. I'm going to go back to that again because it makes me wonder if there's is there any misogyny? Let's just say it out loud, right? Are they trying to make her less than what she was because she was a woman who had so much power? And what does that say about women in power or the perception of women in power during that time? Because all the bad things that are being said about her, majority of it comes from the men who she's controlling.
Well, so this is very interesting to me then to go down that route a little bit of that because I think it's maybe at the core of the play and it's a question that also comes up in theater a lot with certain plays is in the reading of it,
Mhm.
do you find the sort of the She-Wolf of France take, do you find that to be Shakespeare writing misogynistic characters who attack this woman who's capable of actually leading and capable of having power? They attack her by calling her a she-wolf. Or is Shakespeare writing a misogynistic play by portraying her as a she-wolf of France? Am I making that distinction clear?
Say that one more time.
So is Shakespeare writing misogynistic characters
Uh-huh.
who are attacking a woman, and he's actually pointing that out?
Hmm.
Or is he writing a misogynistic play?
Ah, good question.
Because I would point to like Kate, Taming of the Shrew. Again,
Right,
I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare. I've devoted my life to the guy.
right,
Taming of the Shrew is a misogynistic play.
right. That
And
is very clear. That is very clear, just in the way that both her and Bianca are treated, but
right.
that takes us down.
Yeah, and like we can figure out ways to help it and figure out ways
Right.
to bring out the strengths of it, but you can't get away from the fact that young Shakespeare, whether it was because it was what the people wanted or whatever, wrote a
Hmm.
misogynistic play. This is
Hmm.
young Shakespeare.
Hmm.
Is this a hit piece? But then when you look at her, she's so complex, it doesn't feel like a hit piece.
No, it doesn't, and it's not. I think it's the characters that he's writing because what is the other explanation that you can have for a woman who has so much power, right? How can you can't rationalize that a woman, as you said, can be that complex because the expectation of a queen consort is to just make sure we have an heir, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we can, your duty is to give me children,
Right.
to continue my line. And if you can't do that, then I'm either going to off with your head, divorce you, or find a mistress, right? So I think because she is as powerful as she is in these plays, they have to find a way um, to go against it, I think, or he's choosing to speak to that by having characters that go against it and make us question why, such as what we're doing right now, I think.
Right. Well, and because that's something that I really enjoy the idea of because Margaret, there's no question going through the plays that Margaret, she's not a villain, but she's
She's
not a
not.
hero.
No,
She's
she's a
just
badass, if I can
she's just a
say that.
badass. Yeah, that's a
She's a
great way of putting it. She's a
badass.
badass. And she
Yeah,
wants what she wants and she's going to go after it.
exactly. And if any other man did that, if a man did that, we would not question it. We would not have a problem with it.
Well,
But
and
because
we see it. It's
woman,
York.
right,
York does it, right?
right.
Like York and Margaret really are the two. In
Mhm.
sometimes the trilogy is I mean, it is a tetralogy, it includes Richard III, but for the trilogy of the Henry Sixes, there's so much history and there's so many characters that sometimes we lose track of like really it's York versus Margaret for
Right.
much of the play. And right, nobody's calling York a monster.
But this
Uh,
is where history is aligned with it because around that time, around 14, I want to say mid 1400s. I don't have the exact date. This is, like I said, just the last few days of me reading some historical facts.
mhm,
But Richard of York was actually on the throne because after a certain battle, she had to escape to Scotland and back to France, historically speaking, not
mhm.
based on Shakespeare. And so he had control and was very almost puritanical about how he was ruling, and and people were not happy with that, but she couldn't do anything. So the best thing for her to do was to put herself into exile at that time. This was before the last battle, after her son got killed. And I know people might get confused because I'm speaking historically what
Right.
happened versus what happened in Shakespeare, because her son wasn't killed historically by the Yorks. He died in battle,
Died in
really.
Tewksbury, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Um,
yeah, and there's something obviously that gets us into, from a dramatic standpoint, the question of the sons, obviously, which comes
right.
up both in this speech and throughout. And there's lots of questions about Margaret's son.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how deep you've gone into this as you're starting to explore the couple of things that come immediately to mind. One is it is the disinheritance of your son that causes you to give up on Henry.
Right.
There's also, I think, a legitimate question. I won't say historically, narratively. There's a
Hmm.
legitimate question of whether or not Edward is Henry's son, given the affair with Suffolk.
But that's another misogynistic outlook or a trope that has been attached to her, I think,
So,
because
go ahead.
because according to Shakespeare, right, she was an adulteress,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's a she-wolf. She's a woman who's hungry for power. All the things that the worst things that you could possibly say about a woman who knows what she wants, who's a badass, like we said, right? And when it comes to the legitimacy of her son, it falls in line with that same trope, because, and I can't help it, I have to go back and forth between
Right.
historically and narratively, right? Historically, she was very close to Suffolk historically. And so I think Shakespeare took that, and upon his death, actually, historically, they did wonder whether or not, if there was something more. There was speculation of whether or not there was something more between her and Suffolk. So I think Shakespeare took that and just rode with, like he went with that as far as he could. So if legitimacy is in question, it just makes it a better play, right? It just makes the stakes higher.
Right. Well, and frankly, the way Henry VI, the character, is written, I think, especially in modern eyes, there's some sympathy for Margaret choosing Suffolk,
Mm,
because she basically says it when she meets Henry. She's like, I didn't know I was coming here to marry a priest. Right. Like
right, right.
and I love the fact that it feels like it adds so much complexity to her that this man, who this isn't actually his son, he doesn't know that, but
Hmm.
somehow he's still disinherited him.
Hmm.
Like that somehow the fates are in play in a weird way with this, and she has to fight back against all of that, and it's really her against the world in this very particular thing of like, and I guess it's a core question I have about her as a character
Right.
is, and I think my guess is that this probably very much intermingles with like being a parent, is, does she always do what is best for her, or does she do what is best for her son? And if she does what is best for her son, when does that change?
So there's two things I want to speak to, because I want to go back a little bit to
Yeah,
talking about her relationship with Suffolk and the possibility that Edward is his son. If I'm hearing you correctly, that there is
I think it's
room.
implied in the play.
Right, it's
Yeah,
implied that it is. And so why do we think, because yes, it seems like it's implied in the play, but I never, in my brief understanding of her so far, I don't know if that's more powerful for me in knowing that I'm fighting for the son of my lover than knowing that fighting for my son, period, to be on the throne to continue my legacy is more important to me.
I agree. I agree that that's more important, almost regardless of who the father is, what the paternity
Exactly.
is.
And
Yes.
I think, and so in answering the latter part of your question, I think it's more about the political right? The continuance of their family line and the continuance of of knowing that she would be, what is the position that is called when, not the regent,
The Queen
uh,
Mother,
Queen
or
Mother. Yeah, or something that's Queen Mother, and I think there's another term for it. But it just allows her to stay in that position of power as long as her son is on the throne. So that's what I think is what she's fighting for.
which I think is kind of, it goes back to that wonderful term like she wolf of like, is it a derogatory, or is it a kind of a compliment in its own way of like, you do think of the wolves as being kind of raised by wolves as a thing, right? Like
Mhm.
they are loyal parents and they'll do anything for their kids, at least narratively. I'm not sure that that's true
No, no,
naturally,
no.
but
I looked this up. I did look
okay.
because I was so fascinated by it, which is why I keep talking about it. Because it's the perception, tangent for a second, it's the perception that we have of women in power that I can't let go of just
Yep.
because without us getting into politics of our where our country is right now. But it's just why do we not trust women in power? Why do we have a hard time with that? So in my rabbit hole or of trying to unpack this she-wolf, I looked it up. And it comes from the Italian word because it's based on that mythology of Romus and
Romulus and Remus.
Romulus and right, exactly. And that the word la lupa, which means she-wolf, can also be used as prostitute.
Hmm. That's interesting. I didn't know
So
that.
yeah, so it feels like what you were just saying, the idea of her being a she-wolf to protect her cubs, to protect her family, it sounds like a good thing. But the way that they inverted that to make it sound like a derogatory thing is also referring, and the question is, we can't confirm this, but the question is, are you also using that word as a way of degrading her, right? And so why is it that it eventually became a term of derogatory? Like, why are we calling her this thing that people now associate with being a bad thing? Where did
So
that then change happen?
yeah, so I'm curious. I'm gonna ask you to self-examine here.
Okay.
It's interesting to me knowing that you haven't played these roles before. It's interesting to me that this is your way in. That it's not. I'm sure that you go through at some point and scansion everything out, do all of the stuff, but that there's kind of this. There seems to be this very deep initial study of basically what makes this woman tick and
Yeah.
what makes the world of the play tick, and also what your take on it is, which I
Mhm.
think is something that we often associate with how playwrights or even maybe directors attack plays of like, well, why am I trying to pitch this play as a director? Why am I trying to write this play? But it's interesting to hear it from an actor standpoint about like, why am I interested in this character? What is it that I want to say with this character? How does this character speak to me? Is that is that normally how you go about attacking characters, where first it's about finding kind of the soul?
Yeah.
Before?
Always.
Interesting.
Always. Because I'm not an actor that just I want to have something to say through the characters that I play. I want to change the narrative or to engage in or be able to have others who are experiencing my performance engage in conversation, right? Whether it's in agreement or disagreement, but there's a conversation to be had about what they see or what they're getting from me. And I've always been that way from the smallest role to the largest role. I love to research. I love to know as much as I can. And my closest of friends and family members will tell you I was always in a book. Like I was always reading something. And I just feel the more we can know about the outside world and not just focusing on the script alone. Yes, I will eventually just focus on the script, but I like to know the world that this is in. the world that it comes from. Why are we choosing this character? What is it that we're trying to say with this character? Because I become connected to the role or the character or the world sooner than later. And I have an immediacy in, or I have an immediate in to what this person is about. But it's just my nature. I I
Well,
love exploring
I
as much
think
as
the
I
reason I'm
can.
interested in it is I've had trouble putting into words why historical context is I find it so valuable in my work as well.
Mhm.
Because sometimes it doesn't, I'm like, I don't have a concrete reason why this will now affect the direction that I'm going to do or something like that. But like a great example of this is the Shapiro books, right? The
Uh-huh.
year of Lear and the other one's on my shelf somewhere, but the 1599, I think the other one's called. But these books that they don't seek to try to tell you anything about the play, they try to tell you about the world
World,
when the
exactly.
play was being written so that you get some insight into what Shakespeare was responding to and what the audiences that he was writing for were responding to in the time. And it again, it's one of those things where it's hard to put into words why that colors a performance or directorial choice as much as it does, but there's something about having that technicolor understanding of both the reality that's being adjusted and the a little more insight into the intent of the initial writing
Yeah.
that can help you know like, oh cool, I can lean into that, or maybe I want to push against that or whatever. It's an interesting element of research that I don't feel like we talk about as much because it's not as concrete. It's not like, oh, ba-bum, ba-bum, bum. Oh, that was weird. Why the ba-bum, bum?
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, we will eventually get to that. But I
Yeah,
think, okay, so I'm also an educator,
right.
right? And when I'm teaching my kids, I use a lot of references from Uta Hagen.
Hmm.
And in Uta Hagen's work, she's all about knowing the world, understanding the world that you are in. Because what that does, it gives you life on stage so that every night your performance is slightly different and shifts in a different way based on what you're receiving from your actor. And all of that research, all of that information that you have just stored in the back, it will find its way to the surface based on what you're getting every night. Because every night your performance is going to be different. If it's not, then we should question that. But
Right.
every night your performance is going to have a little nuances of differences that you are going to be that's going to be based on what you're receiving from the actors around you and the environment of how the audience is receiving the performance that evening or day. So I think that you as the actor, it's your job to have as much of a rich life, a background for that character as much as possible so that when you step on that stage, you're not questioning how am I going to approach the character tonight, or I'm so tired, I don't know if I can do the performance. You may be tired, but if you have that history and that information to lock into, then it's going to help you find new ways, new nuanced ways to find life in that character. So I will spend a lot of time getting as much of the world and finding the soul. I love what you said when you said that of the character so that I can then do the technical stuff, right? And then breaking it down. But then the breaking it down becomes easier for me. I'm not a character that really goes through the ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum anymore because and I hate when I drop names, but when I was working with Derek Jacobi, he was like, it's all about the thought. It's all about the thought. And so if your thought is clear, the audience is going to follow you. So when I'm working on my Shakespeare line, I have in my mind what the ba-bum, ba-bum, because I hear the rhythm now. But for me, it's mainly that I'm making sure that the thought is clear because the thought is going to lead you to the operative word based on the information that you've researched. That's what works for me. It may not work for everyone else.
Yeah, no, that sounds that I'm in agreement. I think that the ba-bum ba-bum, which we keep saying this. I think all of our listeners, this is the iambic pentameter, the 5 feet of the heartbeat of Shakespeare's text is it's the beat in music. it's the timestamp. And you're a professional, to stretch the metaphor, you're a professional musician. You're going to see the timestamp. You're going to understand the timestamp is happening, and you're not going to think about it much more because you just play in 4/4, or you play in 8/4, or you play, in the jazz, stress on the 1 and the 3, and then. But it's not part of your conscious thought. You're thinking about the melody and the thought and the phrasing of that, not the beat underneath. Though I do think for completely new people approaching Shakespeare for the first time, it can be helpful to hear that beat happening in the same way that it's helpful to play chopsticks on the piano or to play scales on the piano.
I agree. I only ask that in your finding the iambic pentameter through your speech, that finding a way to not let it influence or affect the speech pattern of how you're saying it. Because if it's your first time approaching the text, and that's what's helping you to have a grasp on it, what can sometimes happen is that we hear you speak in the language,
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's why I don't teach iambic right away. I teach, what is it that this person wants here? What are they trying to say here? Because then once they understand that, then we go through the iambic to then find what's the important words in there, and then finding our way into connecting to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's the sort of Simon Sinek of which it sounds like your whole approach is of you got to find the why before you start worrying about the how. Right. Is we got to have the why to hold on to. Otherwise, we're trying to make something sound pretty instead of trying to understand what's actually happening beneath it. It's interesting. So let's dig into some of her uglier tendencies then. Like, for example, this speech. So the speech that we're talking about it's not the end of her journey. She has very much further to go in both the end of that play and all of Richard III. But in some ways, it's the climax of her journey. It's the greatest victory that she truly leads in the scene, and she beats her great foe, York.
Right.
It's a bit of a nasty speech. And I'm curious.
Wiping a child's blood on her enemy, on the father. I mean, can you get any nastier than that?
Yeah. So like, talk to me about why, well, why is it so appealing?
Because we love to be evil.
Right.
I mean, to play, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to have a moment in the spotlight as a bad person or as an evil person. It's just, there's something primal about it. I don't know, to be able to tap in to that. But I think that's why I want to play it. It's just, it's not in my nature to be a bad person. I'm not naturally someone who's vindictive. But if I get to play it on stage, why not? Why not explore that?
Something that I always find to be a sort of a fascinating conflict in this speech is the Rutland thing. It's so dark. The wiping the blood of the dead child on the father's face is about as dark as it gets. Apologies to Medea. And but Margaret is a mother with a very similarly aged kid, which is not lost on Shakespeare and the parallels that then happen moving forward in the play. And I wonder how you...
But I think that's why she does it.
Okay.
Because she's a mother. She knows that is the thing that would break you down. If you are a loving father, as we know that York was, how much he loved his sons, that as a mother, knowing what that can do to me, right? Why not? It's not reverse. What I don't know what the term in psychology would be, but it's taking that thing that I know would break me down and using that as a weapon to someone else.
And why does she need to break him? Because she really does, right? She talks about why are you so... There's a big question here of how much fun she's having and how desperate she gets to try to make him get upset.
Right.
It's because he's so stoic.
Power play. It's a power play, right? Just taking my first stab at this before, without
Mhm.
really breaking it down further, but I feel like it's a power play because she ultimately she kills him. She
Yeah.
does what she came there to do. So why go through this whole speech of tormenting him? It's a power play to show both him and his people, the people around him, because you do have witnesses, right?
Yeah.
Of her position of power and that she can do this. The fact that she can do it, I think, is a reason for her to do it because she doesn't have to go through this whole speech to then decide, okay, off with his head. She could have done that in the first 3 lines, the moment she says, put him here, okay, cut his head off. But she goes through, she plays with him. It's titillating. I don't know. Yeah, she even says it. Thou wouldst be feed, I see, to make me sport. She's enjoying watching the demise of this man breaking down, because at the top of it, he is very stoic.
Well,
And
he's stoic throughout. He never gives her anything.
I feel like, don't you think that he eventually does in his,
No.
no?
No, he does in his next speech. He's
In
got
his next
he has his retort speech that happens right after this, where he then, I don't have it in front of me right at this second, but he has basically, do you want to see me weep? Do you want to see me wail? Do you want to see me do
Okay,
this?
yes, that's right.
Then I'll do it. So it's an interesting, I mean, Shakespeare's a very good writer, right? Is like one of the things that I find so immensely complex about this speech is he doesn't give her
What she wants.
what she wants. It's not working. She is here trying to make this man break in front of all of these male soldiers, this woman leading a battle.
Right.
And because he's not reacting. And that there's something tense about that. I would offer that there's some tension that suddenly enters the speech for her because she's trying to do this great celebration destruction of him and he's not cooperating. Right. And the problem with when somebody stops doing this is you, instead of it being fun, you start to look cruel. And
so I think it's intentional from Shakespeare's point of view
to have him not react. Yes, because it gives her such a great obstacle to work opposite. Otherwise, I think she would have lots of actions and tactics, but she would be but there'd be no obstacles. She would just win.
Right.
Whereas now she has the obstacle of he won't break, and it's in public. And so if she fails to break him, it's actually a little bit of a problem. And that adds, I think, an interesting color of her having to like perform almost. It's just it's something that I'm tempted by in the speech.
No. I see where you're going with that. And it makes sense. I just wonder if there's something about, yes, you're absolutely right that he doesn't break, but if it's something about her, specifically from her point of view, from her as the character enjoying, or I don't know. I'm going back and forth in my thoughts now.
Well, good, because I haven't, I mean, as I'm sure you know, as a teacher, like I have not directed the Henry Sixes, but I have coached this speech a number of times. And it's always, I think one of the reasons why people are so attracted to this character and so attracted to this speech is there really are a lot of paths through it. In terms of, and I also think that there is the question, you were talking about this earlier, which I found interesting, is you were saying like the reason she wipes the blood on him is she knows that this is the thing that'll break him because it would break her.
Right.
And I always love that sense of like York and Margaret are these great enemies because they're actually really alike.
Similar. Yep.
And they sort of know how to go at one another. And that might also be part of the reason why York really purposefully doesn't break, is he also knows what you want and what you need. And that you see these two, like one of them is winning and one of them is losing, and yet still he makes himself the biggest obstacle he can for her, even in his defeat. And there's something, and I think it really pays we're not traveling all the way through it right now, but it leads to very interesting choices when he does break in the next speech, because there's both the Margaret choice and the directorial choice of how do the soldiers react. Is
I'm curious to know, because now you have me thinking about your approach to this speech. So when you are working on it, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you finish?
No, you're great.
Okay. When you're coaching this speech, is it your desire to help the person find many different tactics and ways to hopefully, knowing that he won't break, but hopefully to get him to break? Or is it just about technically revving it up to the ultimate objective of killing him? So what is it? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's the first one. The killing is confirmed. The killing's going to happen. The killing has no drama to me.
Okay.
It's already, and by the way, I don't think it has any drama to Margaret or York. They both know where this is going.
Right.
So it's not weirdly. I talk about how like most of Shakespeare's scenes are incredibly compelling because they're always about life and death, love and hate, or honor and dishonor.
Yes.
Actually, in this play, the life and death element is not in play because there is only one possible ending, which is death.
Is death, yeah.
So right. No, the play to me is actually about the human power struggle between these two characters. And so what I tend to push is I tend to just be like, I want to make York the biggest obstacle he can possibly be as a prisoner on a molehill in order for you to have to work hard to have whatever enjoyment or anything else that you want out of this, that you have to work for it. Because otherwise, I'm just going to watch you gloat for 2 minutes. And to me, that's not an interesting speech.
Right.
No, I could imagine this is why I preface that I haven't directed it. It's because it's as you know, and probably our audience knows too, sometimes it's different prepping a speech for an audition versus for a production, because you're trying to make a journey inside a single speech. Whereas I could see the argument in a production that actually this is the end of a journey and it is a gloat. Right? That is the speech, and that it finishes a larger arc. Right. So I'm not necessarily saying that I'm right or wrong here, but I find it interesting to see, like, well, why not give her yet one more obstacle? Right? It's like, come on, dude, just cry for me. What the heck? Like, you're not even going to give me this?
Right. Right. It's just, I don't know. It's fascinating that he doesn't break. I'm going to go back and read his speech after this now, because I remember a little bit of that from the Holy Crown, and from the earlier version, but the Holy Crown is the most recent one that I saw, like I said earlier. And I remember that that's when he does break. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it always, because it to some extent, I feel like we learn. I'd be curious how you feel about this. I think this is true in life as well as with characters, is we often learn the most about characters when they're at their lowest or at their highest, because we see how they treat others and how they react to those situations. And so I find this moment to be in some ways a little bit of that it might have a little bit of a skeleton key to Margaret as a person, of how when she pushes, how she reacts. There's just a lot of fun stuff that can happen in this moment. And I love the idea that it will hurt him. And so, like, does that mean are you actually having fun, or does it hurt you a little bit to even do this to someone else? I just don't know, but I find it all fascinating.
Oh, there's room for it to also hurt her.
Right.
I think there's room for as many facets as we can find, because as we have been unpacking the idea of having a full life, right? So if we can give her room to have these many different facets of approaching this, I think that just makes it even more rich. So I just lost my train of thought. There was something that I was going to say about her having fun.
Well, and I mean, it
They'll
is.
come back to me.
I also love that you mentioned, because I do think it's important. I love that you mentioned that this is public.
That's it. There it is. Thank you. Public, people, right? I think the enjoyment of her going through this is because she has an audience. She has an audience of soldiers. So not only does it give her to put her power on display, but she's having fun with the journey of this because she has an audience. I mean, why would you take your time to say, what is the line she says, my lords? Where is it? Thou wouldst feed, I see to me, your a crown for York, and lords bow low to him. She's inviting them to partake in her performance. So it's as if she is not enjoying the power of this, but wanting to make it a public performance for everyone else as well.
Right. Yes. Right. And that is, and but also it also ratchets up the tension of whether it succeeds or doesn't.
Right.
Is it like it does? Because
To break him?
yeah, just the whole thing, because I can easily imagine, and I don't have the answer to this. I just find the question very interesting. I could easily imagine all of the soldiers loving this. Yeah. They love how like bloodthirsty you are and bowing, and they love all of that shit. Or don't they? Or do they really want, or are they watching you try to break this man and they're watching him just sort of stare at you and not rise to it? And then is there worry that you're gonna lose them? Like, is there suddenly, like, you're putting on a show for your troops? What if it's not as fun as it was supposed to be? Right. And then how do I make it fun again? How do I make sure that the performance is good, that my performance as leader of this army is as enjoyable as I want it to be, even though, once again, York is not behaving. He's not. And so I like is there any additional pressure on her as a woman in a scene surrounded by a bunch of men to put on a good show?
Well, that's a possibility of that's why she invites them to participate.
Right.
Because if that is a theory that they're not enjoying this, or as spectators they're not enjoying this, then I need them to get involved to not only allow me to enjoy this performance that I'm putting on, but for them to kind of push what's the word I'm looking for? To push it forward is for lack of
it makes them accomplices to some degree.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And there's something about that I like too, about the dynamic of, because watching her as a leader throughout these plays is very interesting, because she changes and improves at being a leader as she goes, which I also just love. I love watching a character grow and figure out, like, okay, the way I talk to Suffolk isn't the way I can talk to Henry, isn't the way I talk to troops. So I change and I adjust and I make these. I think in some ways the hallmark of Shakespeare's great characters is you're watching them learn, and you're watching them evolve in real time.
And speaking of evolving, how would you, the thought that came to mind as you were saying that was how we then referred to her in her later years as a witch. And the precedence of calling her a witch, like, which she lives up to by putting cursed on them during Richard III.
Which all come true, right?
Right, which all comes true. So to go back, because as a woman exploring this, do you think what are your thoughts, just broadly speaking, like, what are your thoughts about watching her in this moment during this speech to then evolve to a woman that is not trusted, that is ignored, and then labeled as a witch?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what do I think? That's a great question. And again, I haven't directed these shows, so Shakespeare is not a big fan of the mob. Shakespeare very much seems to consider the mob to be fickle. In almost all plays, considers the mob to be fickle. And I think going back almost to the original conversation we were having about like, is this a misogynistic play or is this a play with a through line of misogyny?
Right.
Is the impossible balancing act that a woman is forced to do in order to be cruel enough for men to respect her, while also be remaining a quote unquote woman, made be on display here. That it's just perilous, the journey she's on, and we're seeing her at the top, but it's a needle point, and staying on that balance is basically an impossibility. And I think that the moment that probably pushes her off the edge is losing her kid. Is losing her raison d'etre to some degree. Is she probably, I don't know, I haven't, again, I'm not, but though that feels like an extremely unbalancing moment of when you lose the reason you've been doing it, and that once a woman falls in a man's world, they fall hard.
But why can't it be, just putting it out there, not saying that, but why can't it
please push back. I'm making stuff up on the spot right now.
But it's like, well, why can't it be it's a woman who's grieving her dead child and not a woman who's become a witch? You understand what I'm saying? It's like if that is the reason why she ultimately becomes this person that can say these things that do become true eventually, why do we resort to that? Why can't it be a woman who is grieving? She's grieving the loss of her husband. She's grieving whether she loved him or not, right? But there's a loss there. There's a loss of her child. She's by herself. And then if you want to throw in the other women, you have two other women who don't trust her or don't care for her as well. So it's the idea. I think maybe I am sensitive to it as a woman, and how labeling can either be when something comes true, not a premonition. I just lost the word. I can't think of it, but it's the thing of you're making this true even.
I know what you mean. Basically, by putting it into the world, you make it true. There is a word for this that is also not in my mind, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's coming out
of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Thank you very much. Self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's coming out of grief. It's coming out of grief. It's just interesting that through a man's eye, that's where we go with justifying or labeling.
Yeah, and I guess that's interesting because I guess there's kind of two questions. One is the perception. Why is a fallen woman like her then perceived as a witch? And I think that's an interesting perception question. And I think it goes into how we have always perceived women who we call witches, is like they tend to be a little bit more powerful than we're comfortable with, a little bit more knowledgeable than we're comfortable with. And so how about we just blame it on the supernatural and box them in a corner and say, it couldn't possibly be that you know more than me. You must be in league with the devil.
Right.
That's how basically all witches have been created that way. Now, the second question is, she does actually seem to achieve some supernatural abilities.
It's like you have space for that argument, but then you actually make it come. She is that in a way,
right? And that I think is I'm trying to remember. There is some supernatural stuff in the Henry Sixes with I'm going to struggle now too. The regent's wife goes down a supernatural route in Henry VI Part 2. She pursues punishing Margaret with needles in a doll.
Vaguely remember that. Vaguely remember that. Yes.
Now it doesn't work.
Right.
So it's fake supernatural, but kind of the seeds are laid there. And then by Richard III, we have a series of more psycho supernatural elements coming into play, your ability, the Margaret ability to curse, Richard III's nightmares.
Right.
You start to have these moments that do um, start to cross the line, and this is why I think I shared this theory with you off air. Is why I very much feel like Richard III is the genesis of Macbeth, in
Ah,
that you have
that's
this,
that.
yeah, you have this evil king with then supernatural, but the supernatural elements he's only flirting with. You have like one of the final scenes of Richard III are the three women sitting on the ground in a circle cursing the king. You
Right.
have the three weird sisters somewhat showing themselves. There's some
Mhm.
interesting stuff in, there's also some very dramaturgical kind of structural stuff between the two plays that are shared. But I always find like it's like Shakespeare's learning. He's learning,
Mhm.
oh, these history plays become a little more interesting if we just toss a little supernatural elements in there. So, which is not a satisfying answer to your question, is like, nah, well, the playwright thought it would be cool. But also, I think sometimes that's the answer too, is like,
Right.
look, she ends up having the ability to curse people by by the
Yeah, I
point.
just thought it was an interesting thought after watching her go through this journey here where she exudes so much power, right, in trying to break this man down. And then we see her at her lowest later on. Um,
Yes. And you're right. I'm very interested. I think your take on the labels, just in general, of
mm,
her journey through the play, is she's always labeled in the play. Right from the beginning, she's the
from the beginning.
gorgeous, poor girl
Mm-hmm.
who is married because she's hot.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's a monster. And
Mm-hmm.
then she's a witch. And then
Mm-hmm.
she's, but she's never just like a,
She's
a
not
woman.
just a woman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's never just a woman. She's never allowed to just be a woman. And I also don't know how much he's jingoism plays a part there too, with her being
That word?
French.
What was that word?
Just nationalism, right?
Oh, okay.
Just her being French.
Yeah.
Not that, because that is something that we've completely lost track of in today's world, is that these plays are happening right around the historic turn of thinking about all of these individual kingdoms
Mm-hmm.
versus thinking about the nations of England and France. That
Mm-hmm.
turn
Mm-hmm.
happens in these plays.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there's also that, is she Margaret of Anjou, or is she the she wolf of France?
Right.
Is she from
Right.
Anjou, or is she from France? Is she a
Right.
bad guy because she's French?
Right.
And that's a very interesting question as well. It's a little harder to integrate into the plays, but sometimes it's helpful to remember from a historical perspective of like, we
Well,
think of,
England always had their claim to France because of the fact that Normandy,
right,
if you know the history. So they always have that claim to it. And the moment that they separate or they're no longer part of it, there is an attack on that. There is an attack on nationalism in that way, I think.
right, right. And then and like you start with, this play starts, the series starts with Joan.
Hmm.
And Joan is, if
A representation of France. She's a
France,
representation of that. Yeah.
right, she's the one who goes, no, 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 we're Frenchmen and they're the goddams.
Yeah.
It's not we're from Anjou and we're from blah, no, we're French.
Right. Yeah,
And so
exactly.
we see the rise of nationalism.
Right.
And which I think does play a part in this too. It's like, not only is she a woman, she's a French woman.
She's French woman.
Right after a French woman kicked their ass for a while, right? Like
Right.
they're not at
Right.
the point where they're like, yay, French women. they're in burn them at the stake, French women part.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh,
Well,
is there anything else? I'm trying to think. Well, it just jumped out at me because we're talking about nationalism, but Plantagenet, right? I don't know if that falls in line, but how is it that that great Plantagenet is crowned so soon and broke his solemn oath? Or is that more?
no,
I'm
so
trying to find a
he's
question that's aligned with that because it's Lancaster versus Plantagenet, right?
right.
So that makes it a little bit civil. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but we were talking about nationalism. I don't know. It kind of made me think of the Lancastrian line versus the Plantagenet line, and how is that similar or different, or where does that fall in the argument or the discussion of nationalism?
And
Or
who cares and who doesn't?
right.
Right? Is like, do your commoner soldiers give two shits that York is a Plantagenet? But
Right.
I bet your nobles do.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's an interesting thing of like, yeah, when you switch from calling him York to calling him Plantagenet, who are you targeting and
Right.
why? And that's exactly one of those things where these sort of little historical nuances do help us sort of understand, why does she choose in this moment to say this thing specifically targeted at these people?
Yeah. And when you go through speeches, do you do that? I find when I go through nuggets of historical information or just things, I'm like, okay, let's talk about him reveling in the parliament. What was happening at that time? I do that, and then I'll make a note to myself, and then I'll go back to it later on, because I think you should review, or you should touch on your script more than once, like several times.
Yeah, to answer your question, yes, I do. And I actually think, and this may be a good way to wrap this. I mean,
We're already there.
We're well over an hour. Is that it's such a trope, but it's the curious mind. It's if you look at something, don't just take it at its value on the page. Ask the question: what does it mean to revel in Parliament? Why are they all calling her a she-wolf of France? Why do they then call her a witch? Is like, and these questions can be huge, like this, like where you are at this point in the process of kind of trying to hone in on the soul of the character. And then they can even be down to like, well, right, why did she choose York in this sentence and Plantagenet in this sentence? That's a choice. The character just made a choice. I don't have the information I need to understand why she made that choice. Right. So now I need to go and be curious and look that up.
Exactly.
And do that. And then I think it's one of the things that I think makes theater artists so special, is that we remain curious.
Exactly.
So
that's the best way to be, I think, as an artist, is to be curious.
Yeah. And there's
everything. Because
nothing more exciting.
You ask questions and you don't just follow the herd.
Yes.
And I'm on several levels.
Oh gosh. I mean, I still hope one day when I'm mature enough to direct an entire project Socratically and only ask questions. I might need a few extra rehearsal weeks, but we'll get there. So, yes. Well, Shirine, this has been absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time and for exploring this epic character with me. Now we've got to figure out a way for you to play it.
We have to. We got to make it, put it out there in the universe.
Yes. All right. Well, we're putting it out there in the universe now for anyone listening who has the power to produce. That Shirine would make a wonderful Margaret. Thank you all for listening. My name is Nathan Winkelstein, and this has been the Red Bull Theater Podcast. Our revels now are ended. Until next time, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Red Bull Theater Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your support helps us to bring you more captivating conversations and insights into the world of classic theater. To stay updated on our latest activities, follow us on social media, get on our mailing list, and visit www.redbulltheater.com, where you'll find an abundance of podcasts, readings, classes, seminars, productions, and more. Your support makes all of this possible, so please consider making a tax-deductible donation on our website to help us continue bringing classical theater to contemporary audiences. Until next time, thanks, and ever thanks.